Sarah Martinez never imagined that her hands, trained to heal, would one day hold a weapon that changed everything. She grew up in a small town in Texas where everyone knew everyone else's business. Her father worked at the local hardware store, and her mother taught third grade at the elementary school. Sarah was the middle child of three, always trying to find her place between her older brother, who excelled at sports, and her younger sister, who was the family's artistic genius. When Sarah graduated high school, she felt lost. College seemed expensive and uncertain. Her grades were good, but not exceptional. She watched her classmates head off to universities or start jobs at local businesses, but nothing felt right for her. That's when her uncle Marcus, a retired Army sergeant, suggested she consider the military. He told her about the medical corps, how she could learn valuable skills while serving her country. The idea appealed to Sarah more than she expected. She had always been the one her friends called when they got hurt during childhood adventures. She was calm under pressure and had steady hands. Her mother worried about the dangers, but her father supported the decision. After months of research and soul-searching, Sarah enlisted in the Army with a commitment to become a combat medic. Basic training was harder than anything Sarah had ever experienced. The physical demands pushed her body to its limits, but the mental challenges were equally tough. She learned to follow orders without question, to work as part of a team, and to keep going when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Some nights, she lay in her bunk wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But medical training was different. Sarah found her calling in the sterile classrooms and practice scenarios. She learned to treat gunshot wounds, perform emergency surgery, and stabilize patients under the most difficult conditions. Her instructors noticed her natural talent and calm demeanor. She could keep her hands steady even when instructors shouted at her or set off loud noises to simulate combat conditions. During advanced combat medical training, Sarah met other medics who would become her closest friends in the military. There was James, a quiet guy from Oregon who wanted to become a doctor after his service. Maria was from New York and had a sharp sense of humor that helped everyone get through the toughest days. And then there was David, whose family had a long military tradition and who seemed born for this life. The four of them studied together, practiced procedures on each other, and shared their fears about deployment. They all knew that being a combat medic meant something different from other military roles. They would be expected to run toward danger, not away from it. When soldiers were wounded, medics had to expose themselves to enemy fire to reach them. The mortality rates for combat medics were among the highest in the military. Sarah's first deployment came 18 months after she enlisted. She was assigned to a forward operating base in Afghanistan, in a region where Taliban activity had increased significantly. The base was small, housing about 200 soldiers and located in a valley surrounded by mountains that provided perfect cover for enemy snipers and ambush attacks. The landscape was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. The mountains were beautiful but dangerous, and the desert stretched endlessly in every direction. The heat during the day was oppressive, but nights could be surprisingly cold. The local villages were scattered throughout the region, and building relationships with the inhabitants was crucial for gathering intelligence about enemy movements. Sarah quickly learned that her medical training, as thorough as it had been, could not fully prepare her for the reality of treating wounded soldiers in combat. The first time she heard incoming mortars, her heart raced so fast she thought it might explode. But when the attack ended and wounded soldiers needed help, her training took over. Her hands remained steady as she worked to save lives. The other soldiers at the base initially treated Sarah with a mixture of respect and protectiveness. They knew medics were essential, but they also worried about her safety. Some of the older soldiers had served with female medics before and shared stories about their courage and skill. Others had never worked with women in combat roles and weren't sure what to expect. Sarah proved herself quickly. During her first month at the base, she treated everything from minor cuts and bruises to serious combat injuries. She learned to work with limited supplies and under conditions that would have been impossible in any civilian hospital. Sometimes she had to perform surgery in a tent while artillery fire exploded nearby. Other times, she had to treat multiple patients simultaneously when convoy attacks brought several wounded soldiers to the base at once. The relationships Sarah built with her patients went beyond medical care. She became someone they could talk to about their fears, their families back home, and their hopes for the future. Many soldiers found it easier to open up to their medic than to their commanding officers or fellow soldiers. Sarah listened to stories about children taking first steps, wives starting new jobs, and parents facing health problems. But the job also brought heartbreak. Despite her best efforts, not every soldier she treated survived their injuries. The first time Sarah lost a patient, a 19-year-old soldier named Tommy from Ohio, she questioned everything. She wondered if she had made a mistake, if she could have done something different, if she was really cut out for this work. Her commanding officer, Captain Rodriguez, helped her through that dark period. He explained that combat medics save many more lives than they lose, and that the soldiers who don't survive usually have injuries too severe for anyone to treat under those conditions. He told her that the real measure of a medic's success was not in preventing all deaths, but in giving every wounded soldier the best possible chance at survival. As weeks turned into months, Sarah developed a reputation among the soldiers at the base. They called her Doc with genuine affection and respect. She became known for her skill, her calm demeanor under pressure, and her willingness to risk her own safety to help wounded soldiers. But she also became known for something else, her determination to learn everything she could about the enemy they were fighting. Sarah spent her free time studying intelligence reports, talking to local interpreters, and learning about Taliban tactics and strategies. She wanted to understand not just how to treat the wounds that resulted from combat, but how those wounds occurred in the first place. This knowledge, she believed, could help her be more effective at her job and maybe even help prevent some injuries from happening. Little did Sarah know that this curiosity about the enemy, combined with a single moment of decision under fire, would soon transform her from a combat medic into something entirely different, and change the course of the conflict in ways no one could have predicted. The morning that changed everything started like any other at Forward Operating Base Granite. Sarah woke before dawn to the sound of helicopters bringing in supplies and personnel rotations. She completed her usual routine of checking medical supplies, reviewing patient charts, and preparing for whatever the day might bring. The weather was clear, which usually meant increased patrol activity and higher chances of contact with enemy forces. Around noon, radio chatter indicated that a convoy heading to a nearby village had been delayed due to mechanical problems with one of the vehicles. The convoy consisted of 2 Humvees and an armored truck carrying supplies for the local school that American forces had helped rebuild. The mission was part of ongoing efforts to win hearts and minds in the region, but everyone knew these humanitarian missions were often targets for Taliban attacks. Sarah was in the medical tent treating a soldier for a minor infection when the first distress call came over the radio. The convoy had been ambushed about 5 miles from the base, in a narrow pass between 2 hills that provided perfect cover for attackers. Multiple soldiers were wounded, and the convoy was pinned down by heavy gunfire from elevated positions on both sides of the road. Within minutes, Sarah and 2 other medics were loading into a rescue helicopter along with a squad of soldiers. The flight to the ambush site took only 8 minutes, but during those minutes, Sarah's mind raced through everything she knew about treating trauma patients in active combat zones. She checked and rechecked her medical supplies, ensuring everything was organized for quick access. As the helicopter approached the ambush site, Sarah could see smoke rising from one of the vehicles. The convoy was stopped in the middle of the narrow pass, with soldiers taking cover behind their vehicles while enemy fire came from multiple directions. The helicopter pilot had to circle several times before finding a landing zone that was relatively protected from the crossfire. The moment the helicopter touched down, Sarah and the rescue team sprinted toward the convoy. Enemy bullets kicked up dust around their feet, and Sarah could hear the distinctive crack of rounds passing close to her head. Her training took over completely. Her fear was still there, but it was pushed into the background by years of preparation for exactly this situation. The first wounded soldier Sarah reached was Sergeant Miller, a veteran with 3 previous deployments. He had taken shrapnel in his leg and was losing blood rapidly. Sarah immediately began working to stop the bleeding while other members of the rescue team established a defensive perimeter. The sound of gunfire was constant, coming from at least 3 different positions in the hills above them. While Sarah worked on Sergeant Miller, she could hear radio communications between the rescue team leader and base command. The enemy had positioned themselves expertly, with overlapping fields of fire that made it nearly impossible for the American forces to advance or retreat safely. The attackers seemed to know exactly where to position themselves for maximum effectiveness, suggesting detailed knowledge of American tactics. As Sarah moved to treat the next wounded soldier, she noticed something that made her pause. The pattern of enemy fire was too coordinated, too precise. These weren't random fighters taking opportunistic shots. This was a well-planned ambush executed by people with significant military training and intimate knowledge of how American forces operated in these situations. The second patient was Private Garcia, who had been driving the lead vehicle when the ambush began. He had bullet wounds in his shoulder and chest, and Sarah could see immediately that his injuries were critical. She began emergency procedures to stabilize him for transport, while enemy fire continued to rain down on their position. It was while treating Private Garcia that Sarah first spotted the enemy position that would change everything. Through a gap between two rocks on the hillside above them, she caught a glimpse of movement. What she saw made her blood run cold. The distinctive uniform and equipment of what appeared to be a high-value target, someone the intelligence reports had been tracking for months. Abdul Rahman al-Mansouri was a Taliban commander responsible for numerous attacks on American forces throughout the region. He was on the military's most wanted list, with a substantial bounty for his capture or elimination. Sarah recognized him from the intelligence briefings she had studied so carefully during her free time. He was directing the ambush personally, using hand signals to coordinate the movements of fighters positioned throughout the hills. Sarah found herself in an impossible situation. Her primary duty was to treat wounded soldiers and get them to safety. But she was also looking at one of the most dangerous enemy commanders in the region, someone whose elimination could save countless American lives. The enemy position was approximately 150 meters away, at the extreme range for accurate rifle fire, but not impossible for someone with proper training. During advanced combat training, all medics learned basic marksmanship, but Sarah had always been particularly skilled with rifles. She had grown up hunting with her father and uncle, and her natural steadiness under pressure translated well to shooting. Her instructors had noted her exceptional accuracy, but she had never imagined using those skills in combat. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. More soldiers were being wounded and ammunition was running low. The rescue helicopter couldn't take off with patients while under such heavy fire, and reinforcements were at least 20 minutes away. Sarah realized that eliminating the enemy commander might disrupt the ambush enough to allow the rescue to succeed. Sarah made a decision that went against everything she had been trained to do as a medic. She grabbed the rifle from a wounded soldier who could no longer use it, checked the ammunition, and began calculating the shot. The distance was significant. The target was partially concealed, and she would have only one opportunity before enemy fighters identified her position and returned fire. Taking the shot meant abandoning her medical duties temporarily, something that violated both her training and her personal code as a healer. But she also knew that failing to act might result in more wounded and dead soldiers, including her patients who couldn't be evacuated under current conditions. Sarah positioned herself behind the limited cover provided by one of the damaged vehicles. She controlled her breathing, adjusted for distance and wind, and acquired her target through the rifle's scope. Abdul Rahman al-Mansouri was clearly visible, still directing his fighters, and apparently confident that his position was secure. From American fire, the weight of the moment pressed down on Sarah as she prepared to pull the trigger. She thought about her oath as a medic to do no harm, about the wounded soldiers depending on her for medical care, and about all the American lives that could be saved if this particular enemy commander was eliminated. Her finger moved to the trigger as she made her final calculations. In that moment, Sarah Martinez was no longer just a combat medic. She was about to become something else entirely, though she couldn't yet understand the full implications of what was about to happen. The single shot she was preparing to take would not only eliminate a dangerous enemy commander, but would also set in motion a series of events that would transform the entire conflict in ways no one could have predicted. Sarah's fingers squeezed the trigger with the same steady precision she used when inserting an IV or suturing a wound. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and through the scope, she watched Abdul Rahman al-Mansouri stumble and fall behind the rocky outcrop. The shot had found its mark, striking the Taliban commander in the chest and eliminating one of the most dangerous enemies in the region. The immediate effect was exactly what Sarah had hoped for. The coordinated enemy fire became sporadic and confused without al-Mansouri's leadership. Taliban fighters began withdrawing from their positions, apparently unsure how to continue the ambush without their commander's direction. The change in tactical situation allowed the rescue team to stabilize their wounded and prepare for evacuation. Sarah immediately returned to her medical duties, but something fundamental had changed. As she worked on Private Garcia's chest wound, her hands remained steady, but her mind was racing with the implications of what she had just done. She had crossed a line that few combat medics ever crossed, transitioning from healer to warrior in the span of a single moment. The helicopter evacuation proceeded without further casualties. Sarah and her patients were airlifted back to Forward Operating Base Granite, where she continued treating the wounded soldiers in the relative safety of the base medical facility. Sergeant Miller's leg was saved through Sarah's quick action at the ambush site. Private Garcia required emergency surgery, but he survived and would eventually make a full recovery. Initially, Sarah told no one about the shot she had taken. The official after-action report credited the elimination of Abdul Rahman al-Mansouri to accurate rifle fire from rescue team personnel, without specifying which member of the team had made the kill. Sarah was content to let the matter remain anonymous, focusing instead on the successful medical mission and the lives that had been saved. But keeping secrets on a small forward operating base was nearly impossible. Within days, other members of the rescue team had begun piecing together what had happened. They had noticed Sarah picking up the rifle, seen her take the shooting position, and observed the immediate change in enemy behavior following the shot. Word began to spread quietly through the base that their combat medic had eliminated a high-value target. The reaction from fellow soldiers was mixed and complicated. Some expressed amazement and respect for Sarah's marksmanship and tactical decision-making. They saw her action as heroic, saving American lives by eliminating a dangerous enemy commander. These soldiers began treating Sarah with a new level of respect, acknowledging that she had proven herself in combat beyond her medical duties. Others were troubled by the idea of a medic taking an offensive combat role. They worried about the implications for medical neutrality and the protection traditionally afforded to medical personnel under international law. Some expressed concern that if medics became known for combat actions, enemy forces might be more likely to target them specifically. Captain Rodriguez called Sarah into his office 3 days after the ambush. He had received reports about her actions and wanted to understand exactly what had happened. Sarah provided a complete and honest account of her decision-making process, from recognizing the enemy commander to calculating the tactical benefits of eliminating him. Rodriguez listened carefully without interrupting. When Sarah finished her account, he sat quietly for several minutes before responding. He explained that her actions had likely saved lives and disrupted enemy operations in the region significantly. Intelligence reports indicated that al-Mansouri's death had created confusion and power struggles among local Taliban groups. However, Rodriguez also explained the complications that Sarah's actions might create. Military lawyers would need to review the incident to ensure that her actions were within the rules of engagement. There would be questions about whether a medic taking offensive action violated international conventions regarding medical personnel. The incident would need to be reported up the chain of command, potentially reaching very high levels of military leadership. Most importantly, Rodriguez warned Sarah that her reputation would precede her throughout the military community. Word of a combat medic who eliminated high-value targets would spread far beyond Forward Operating Base Granite. This could create both opportunities and challenges for her future military career. Within a week of the ambush, Sarah began noticing changes in how she was treated by soldiers throughout the base. Some approached her with newfound respect, asking questions about her background and training. Others seemed more cautious around her, apparently unsure how to interact with a medic who had proven capable of lethal combat action. The changes became more pronounced when a journalist embedded with American forces in the region learned about the incident. Despite efforts to keep the story classified, details began leaking to media outlets. Sarah found herself the subject of news articles describing the combat medic who changed the rules of engagement and the healer who became a warrior. Military intelligence officers arrived at the base to debrief Sarah about her knowledge of enemy operations and tactics. They were particularly interested in how she had recognized al-Mansouri and what intelligence she had gathered through her careful study of enemy activities. Sarah's reputation for studying intelligence reports during her free time suddenly became very relevant to her superiors. The debriefings revealed that Sarah had developed an unusually comprehensive understanding of enemy operations in the region. Her medical background had given her unique insights into the patterns of injuries sustained by both American and enemy fighters. She could analyze casualty reports to identify trends in enemy tactics and weaponry. Intelligence officers began asking Sarah to review reports and provide analysis based on her medical and tactical perspectives. They discovered that her combination of medical knowledge and combat experience provided valuable insights that pure intelligence analysts sometimes missed. Sarah found herself being consulted on enemy capabilities and likely courses of action. This new role created internal conflict for Sarah. She had enlisted to be a healer, to save lives and help wounded soldiers recover from their injuries. Now she was being asked to use her knowledge to help military operations target and eliminate enemy forces. The line between healing and killing was becoming increasingly blurred. The situation became more complex when Taliban propaganda began, featuring stories about American medics who violated medical neutrality by engaging in combat operations. Enemy forces started specifically targeting medical personnel, claiming that Americans had made medics legitimate military targets through their actions. Sarah realized that her single shot had consequences extending far beyond the immediate tactical situation. She had inadvertently become a symbol of changing warfare, representing the breakdown of traditional distinctions between combatants and non-combatants. Her actions were being used to justify new approaches to conflict by both American forces and their enemies. As her deployment neared its midpoint, Sarah faced a crucial decision about her future in the military. Command had offered her opportunities for specialized training that would formally combine her medical skills with intelligence and tactical operations. She could become part of an elite unit that operated at the intersection of medicine and warfare. The offer represented everything Sarah had never known she wanted: the opportunity to use all her skills to maximum effect in service of her country. But it also meant abandoning the pure healing mission that had originally drawn her to become a combat medic. She would be crossing a line from which there might be no return. Sarah spent long hours considering her options, knowing that her decision would not only determine her own future, but might also influence how the military approached the role of medical personnel in future conflicts. The single pull of a trigger had opened doors she never knew existed, but walking through those doors would transform her into something entirely different from the person who had enlisted to help save lives. Sarah's decision came during a particularly difficult week at Forward Operating Base Granite. 3 separate attacks had resulted in multiple casualties, and she had worked almost non-stop treating wounded soldiers. During one exhausting 18-hour period, she had performed emergency surgery on 4 different patients, saved the life of a soldier who had stepped on an improvised explosive device, and coordinated medical evacuations under enemy fire. It was during this period of intense medical activity that Sarah fully understood how her unique combination of skills could serve a larger purpose. While treating a wounded Taliban fighter who had been captured during one of the attacks, she noticed tattoos and scars that indicated he had received specialized training. Her medical examination revealed evidence of enhanced physical conditioning and previous injuries consistent with advanced military training. Sarah's observations provided intelligence officers with crucial information about enemy training programs and recruitment methods. Her medical expertise allowed her to gather intelligence that traditional interrogation methods might have missed, She could determine things about prisoners' backgrounds, training, and recent activities based on their physical condition and injury patterns. This incident convinced Sarah that accepting the specialized training opportunity was the right decision. She could serve her country more effectively by combining her healing skills with intelligence gathering and tactical operations. The traditional role of combat medic was important, but Sarah had discovered she could contribute something unique to the military mission. The specialized training program Sarah joined was classified at the highest levels. She was transferred to a facility in Virginia, where she spent 6 months learning advanced interrogation techniques, intelligence analysis, battlefield psychology, and specialized weapons training. The program combined elements of medical training, psychological operations, and special forces tactics. Sarah's fellow trainees came from diverse military backgrounds. There were Navy SEALs learning medical skills, Army Rangers studying psychological operations, and intelligence analysts learning combat tactics. Everyone in the program had demonstrated exceptional abilities in their primary field and shown potential for cross-training in other specialties. The training was more challenging than anything Sarah had experienced, including her original combat medic preparation. She learned to use her medical knowledge to assess enemy capabilities and intentions. She studied how to conduct interrogations that appeared to be medical examinations, but actually gathered crucial intelligence. She practiced using her reputation as a healer to gain the trust of enemy combatants and civilian informants. Most controversially, Sarah learned to use medical procedures as psychological pressure during interrogations. This training troubled her deeply as it seemed to violate the fundamental principles of medical ethics she had sworn to uphold. Her instructors argued that these techniques could save American lives by gathering intelligence that prevented attacks. But Sarah struggled with the moral implications. The weapons training was extensive and went far beyond basic marksmanship. Sarah learned to use sniper rifles, specialized ammunition designed for specific tactical situations, and weapon systems that could be concealed within medical equipment. She became proficient with weapons she had never imagined using, while maintaining her medical skills through continuous practice. Upon completing the training program, Sarah was assigned to a joint special operations unit that conducted missions throughout Afghanistan and neighboring countries. Her official designation remained combat medic, but her actual duties involved a complex mixture of medical care, intelligence gathering, psychological operations, and precision elimination of high-value targets. Sarah's first mission with her new unit targeted a Taliban commander who was coordinating attacks on medical facilities and humanitarian aid operations. Intelligence indicated that he was deliberately targeting medical personnel in violation of international law, making him a priority for elimination. Sarah's unit was tasked with locating and neutralizing him while gathering intelligence about his network. The mission required Sarah to pose as a medical volunteer with a humanitarian organization operating in a contested region of Afghanistan. She would provide genuine medical care to local civilians while gathering intelligence about enemy activities. When the opportunity presented itself, she would eliminate the target using specialized medical equipment that concealed a precision weapon. The assignment required Sarah to spend 3 weeks in a remote village, operating a medical clinic during the day and transmitting intelligence to her unit during the night. She treated everything from childhood illnesses to combat injuries, building trust with local residents who provided information about enemy movements. The moral complexity of her situation weighed heavily on Sarah. During the day, she was saving lives and providing comfort to people caught in the middle of a violent conflict. At night, she was planning the death of a man who was also someone's son, husband, or father, regardless of his actions against American forces. The target, Commander. Rashid Hakim eventually visited Sarah's clinic seeking treatment for a chronic medical condition. Sarah found herself in the surreal situation of providing genuine medical care to a man she had been sent to kill. Hakim was polite and grateful for her treatment, expressing hope that more medical assistance would be available for his people. During the medical examination, Sarah gathered crucial intelligence about Hakim's health, daily routines, and security arrangements. She also confirmed his identity through physical characteristics described in intelligence reports. Everything she learned would be used to plan his elimination, creating a profound ethical dilemma about the relationship between healing and killing. Sarah's internal conflict intensified when Hakim brought his injured young daughter to the clinic. The child had been hurt in an explosion, possibly from an American bombing raid, and needed immediate surgery. Sarah spent hours saving the girl's life, using all her medical skills to repair internal injuries and prevent infection. The gratitude, in Hakim's eyes as Sarah worked to save his daughter, created a moment of human connection that transcended their roles as enemies. For those hours in the operating room, Sarah was purely a healer, and Hakim was simply a father desperate to save his child. The complexity of war and the humanity of individual people became impossible to ignore. Despite these complications, Sarah completed her mission. She eliminated Commander Hakim using a method that appeared to be a medical emergency, avoiding suspicion from his security team and allowing her to extract safely. Intelligence gathered during the mission led to the disruption of several planned attacks on medical facilities. The success of Sarah's first mission established her reputation within the special operations community. She had demonstrated the ability to operate effectively in the gray areas where medicine, intelligence, and warfare intersected. Her superiors praised her adaptability and effectiveness, but Sarah herself struggled with the psychological toll of her actions. Sarah realized that she had become something that didn't exist in traditional military doctrine: a healer who killed, a medic who conducted psychological warfare, a doctor who served as an assassin. Her unique role was effective from a military standpoint, but it created ethical and psychological challenges that no training could fully address. As her deployment continued, Sarah found herself increasingly isolated from both traditional medical personnel and standard combat troops. Medics questioned her commitment to healing, while infantry soldiers were unsure how to relate to someone whose primary weapon was their medical knowledge. She existed in a space between worlds, belonging fully to neither. The isolation was compounded by the classified nature of her work. Sarah could not discuss her missions or moral struggles with friends, family, or traditional military counselors. She carried the weight of her actions alone, developing coping mechanisms that allowed her to continue functioning but at a significant personal cost. Sarah's transformation from combat medic to something entirely new was complete, but the full implications of her evolution were only beginning to become clear. Her actions were creating precedents that would influence military doctrine for years to come, while simultaneously challenging fundamental assumptions about the nature of medical practice in warfare. The psychological weight of Sarah's dual role as healer and killer began to manifest in unexpected ways during her second year of specialized operations. She started having vivid nightmares where she could not distinguish between patients she had saved and targets she had eliminated. In her dreams, every person she treated transformed into an enemy, and every enemy she killed appeared as a patient seeking help. Sarah's handler, a colonel named Patricia Webb, noticed the changes during their regular debriefings. Webb had managed special operations personnel for over 15 years and recognized the signs of psychological stress that came with morally ambiguous missions. She arranged for Sarah to receive counseling from a psychiatrist cleared for classified operations, but the sessions provided limited relief. The psychiatrist, Dr. Michael Chen, explained that Sarah was experiencing a form of moral injury that was relatively new to military psychology. Traditional combat stress resulted from fear and trauma associated with life-threatening situations. Sarah's condition was different. It stemmed from actions that conflicted with her fundamental identity as a healer, while simultaneously being necessary for her military mission. Dr. Chen helped Sarah understand that her feelings were normal responses to an abnormal situation. No previous generation of military medical personnel had been asked to operate in the gray areas where Sarah found herself. Her psychological struggle was not a sign of weakness, but rather evidence of her underlying humanity and moral compass. During this period of psychological adjustment, Sarah's operational effectiveness remained high. Her unique combination of medical skills and tactical training made her invaluable for missions that required precision and minimal collateral damage. She had become the military's go-to specialist, for situations where traditional special forces tactics were too blunt or conventional. Medical approaches were insufficient. One such mission involved infiltrating a terrorist medical facility that was treating wounded fighters while also serving as a weapons storage and planning center. Intelligence indicated that the facility was protected by its medical status, making traditional military action legally complicated. Sarah's medical credentials provided cover for reconnaissance that led to the facility's eventual shutdown. Another assignment required Sarah to provide medical training to local Allied forces, while secretly assessing their loyalty and effectiveness. She discovered that several supposedly Allied commanders were providing information to enemy forces, intelligence that prevented multiple ambushes of American troops. Her medical role allowed her access to information that traditional intelligence operatives could never have obtained. Sarah's most complex mission came when intelligence identified a terrorist leader who was dying from cancer but still actively planning attacks on American interests. The target, known as the Doctor for his medical background, was using his terminal diagnosis to recruit suicide bombers by claiming he could provide them with medical guarantees about their martyrdom. The mission required Sarah to pose as a specialist oncologist who could provide advanced treatment for the Doctor's cancer. She would gain his trust through genuine medical care, while gathering intelligence about his network and ultimately eliminating him through methods that would appear to be medical complications from his existing condition. Preparing for this mission required Sarah to study advanced cancer treatment beyond her existing medical knowledge. She spent weeks learning about oncology procedures, cancer medications, and the psychological aspects of treating terminal patients. Her cover identity was supported by falsified medical credentials that positioned her as a renowned cancer specialist, seeking to provide humanitarian care. The mission location was a compound in a remote mountainous region where the Doctor was receiving care from local medical practitioners. Sarah's arrival was carefully orchestrated to appear as a response to his family's desperate search for advanced medical treatment. She brought legitimate cancer medications and equipment that would provide real medical benefits while serving her intelligence-gathering mission. The Doctor proved to be a complex individual who challenged Sarah's preconceptions about enemy leaders. He was genuinely suffering from his illness and displayed real concern for the medical care available to people in his region. During their medical consultations, he spoke about his desire to establish proper hospitals and medical training programs for his people. At the same time, intercepted communications confirmed that the Doctor was actively planning attacks that would kill numerous innocent people. He was using his medical knowledge to enhance the effectiveness of explosive devices and was training others to target medical facilities specifically. His humanitarian medical concerns existed alongside his commitment to terrorist activities. Sarah found herself providing genuine palliative care that improved the Doctor's quality of life during his final months, while simultaneously gathering intelligence that would disrupt his terrorist network. She was healing the same person she was planning to kill, creating an ethical paradox that challenged her understanding of right and wrong. The personal connection that developed between Sarah and the Doctor during his treatment created unexpected complications. He began to trust her completely, sharing details about his life, his motivations, and his fears about death. He spoke about his children and his hopes that they would become doctors rather than fighters. These conversations revealed his humanity while making Sarah's ultimate mission more psychologically difficult. The Doctor's family treated Sarah as an honored guest and potential savior. His wife prepared special meals for her. His children brought her drawings and small gifts, and his extended family expressed profound gratitude for her willingness to provide advanced medical care. Sarah realized that eliminating the Doctor would cause genuine grief to people who saw her as a healer and friend. Intelligence gathered during the mission revealed that the Doctor's network was more extensive and dangerous than previously understood. His medical knowledge had enabled the development of new types of biological weapons, and he was training a next generation of medically educated terrorists. Eliminating him would prevent attacks that could kill thousands of people. Sarah's mission concluded when the Doctor died from what appeared to be complications related to his cancer treatment. The method Sarah used was undetectable and appeared to be a natural progression of his terminal illness. His family grieved the loss of a beloved patriarch, while Sarah's intelligence gathering led to the disruption of multiple planned attacks. Returning from the mission, Sarah experienced the most severe psychological crisis of her career. She had formed a genuine therapeutic relationship with a patient while simultaneously planning his death. She had provided comfort to his family while knowing she was responsible for their loss. The boundaries between healing and killing had become completely blurred. Dr. Chen worked intensively with Sarah following her return, helping her process the complex emotions surrounding the mission. He explained that her ability to maintain her humanity and feel moral conflict was actually what made her effective at such assignments. A person who could eliminate targets without psychological consequences would be unsuitable for missions requiring genuine human connection. Colonel Webb recognized that Sarah needed time to recover psychologically before undertaking additional missions. She arranged for Sarah to spend several months in a non-operational role, working with military medical researchers to develop new approaches for psychological support of special operations personnel. This assignment allowed Sarah to use her experiences to help others while processing her own psychological challenges. During this recovery period, Sarah began to understand that her evolution from combat medic to specialized operative had created something entirely new in military structure. She represented a new type of warrior, whose effectiveness came not from superior firepower or tactical skills, but from the ability to operate in the moral ambiguities of modern conflict. Sarah's final transformation came not through another classified mission, but through an unexpected encounter with her own past. During her recovery period at Walter Reed Medical Center, she was asked to consult on the case of a wounded Taliban fighter who had been captured and required complex surgery. The patient was in critical condition, and his injuries were similar to cases Sarah had treated in the field. When Sarah entered the hospital room, she immediately recognized the patient as Commander Yusuf Ahmadi, a Taliban leader she had been tracking for months before her psychological recovery period began. Ahmadi had been responsible for coordinating attacks that killed dozens of American soldiers, and Sarah had developed detailed intelligence profiles on him and his network. Now he lay unconscious and dying, completely dependent on American medical care for his survival. The irony of the situation was overwhelming. Sarah had spent years learning to blur the lines between healing and killing, and now she faced the ultimate test of her identity. Here was a man who had caused immense suffering and death, lying helpless and requiring her medical expertise to survive. Every instinct she had developed as a specialized operative told her this was an opportunity to eliminate a dangerous enemy. Every principle she held as a healer demanded that she provide the best possible medical care. Dr. Chen, who had been working with Sarah on her psychological recovery, was present during her initial consultation on Ahmadi's case. He watched carefully as Sarah examined the patient, noting her professional demeanor and clinical focus. After the examination, they discussed the psychological implications of the situation and Sarah's conflicted feelings about treating a known enemy. Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She chose to provide Ahmadi with the highest quality medical care possible, drawing on all her skills and experience to save his life. She performed complex surgery, managed his post-operative care personally, and spent weeks ensuring his complete recovery. Her colleagues watched in amazement as she demonstrated the same dedication to this enemy patient as she had shown to wounded American soldiers. The decision was not motivated by naive idealism or a rejection of her military duties. Instead, Sarah had realized that her true strength lay not in her ability to kill while healing, but in her capacity to remain fundamentally human, despite the moral complexities of modern warfare. Saving Ahmadi's life represented a reclamation of her identity as a healer, even while acknowledging her responsibilities as a military operative. During Ahmadi's recovery, Sarah spent considerable time with him as his primary care physician. He was initially suspicious and hostile, expecting rough treatment or interrogation. Instead, he found Sarah treating him with the same professional care and personal respect she showed to all patients. This unexpected kindness confused and eventually moved him. As Ahmadi's condition improved, he began asking Sarah questions about her background and motivations. He could not understand why an American military doctor would provide such dedicated care to someone she knew was her enemy. Their conversations, conducted through interpreters, revealed the complex humanity that existed on both sides of the conflict. Sarah learned that Ahmadi had originally been a schoolteacher before joining the Taliban following the death of his family in what he believed was an American bombing raid. His hatred for Americans was based on personal loss and grief, rather than abstract ideology. Understanding his background helped Sarah see him as a complete human being, rather than simply an enemy target. These conversations also provided Sarah with unprecedented insights into enemy psychology and motivation. Ahmadi's recovery gave her access to information about Taliban recruitment, training, and operational methods that traditional interrogation could never have obtained. His gratitude for her medical care led him to share details about his organization that proved valuable for preventing future attacks. The intelligence Sarah gathered through her medical relationship with Ahmadi contributed to several successful operations that saved American lives. However, this success came through genuine healing, rather than the morally ambiguous methods she had previously employed. She had found a way to serve her military mission while remaining true to her medical principles. Colonel Webb initially questioned Sarah's decision to prioritize Ahmadi's medical care over potential elimination opportunities. However, the intelligence results and Sarah's obvious psychological improvement convinced her that this approach might be more effective than previous methods. Sarah had accidentally discovered a new model for combining medical and intelligence. Operations Ahmadi's physical recovery was paralleled by a gradual change in his worldview. Extended exposure to Sarah's compassionate care challenged his assumptions about Americans and their motivations. He began questioning whether his violent resistance was truly serving his people's interests or simply perpetuating cycles of suffering and death. When Ahmadi was medically cleared for transfer to a detention facility, he requested a final meeting with Sarah. Through an interpreter, he thanked her for saving his life and treating him with dignity, despite knowing his background. He also provided her with information about planned attacks, explaining that he could not repay her compassion with continued violence against her people. The information Ahmadi provided prevented 3 major terrorist attacks and led to the capture of several high-value targets. More significantly, he agreed to participate in psychological operations aimed at convincing other Taliban fighters to abandon violence. His testimony about receiving compassionate medical care from Americans became a powerful tool for undermining enemy recruitment and morale. Sarah's success with Ahmadi established a new model for military medical operations that combined healing with intelligence gathering and psychological operations. Rather than using medical procedures to facilitate elimination or interrogation, this approach used genuine healing to build relationships that served strategic military objectives while maintaining medical ethics. The Pentagon began studying Sarah's methods and developing training programs based on her experiences. Military medical personnel learned to view enemy treatment not as a burden or missed opportunity, but as a potential pathway to strategic advantages. Sarah became an instructor in these programs, teaching others to navigate the complex moral terrain she had learned to master. Sarah's personal psychology also stabilized during this period. Working with Ahmadi had helped her integrate her roles as healer and military operative without the moral conflict that had previously caused her distress. She had found a way to serve both missions simultaneously while maintaining her fundamental humanity and ethical principles. As Sarah's military service neared its end, she reflected on the journey that had begun with a single shot during a convoy ambush. That moment had set in motion a transformation that changed not only her own life, but also influenced military doctrine and the conduct of modern warfare. She had evolved from a traditional combat medic into something entirely new, a healer whose compassion had become a weapon more powerful than any rifle. Sarah's story became a classified case study used in military academies and special operations training programs. Her evolution demonstrated that the most effective warriors in modern conflict might not be those who could kill most efficiently, but those who could maintain their humanity while navigating the moral complexities of contemporary warfare. Years later, Sarah would receive letters from Ahmadi, who had been released and returned to Afghanistan, where he worked to establish medical clinics and schools. His transformation from terrorist leader to humanitarian worker stood as testimony to the power of compassionate healing to change hearts and minds in ways that traditional military force could never accomplish. The combat medic who had altered the war forever had done so not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through the revolutionary act of choosing to heal her enemies rather than destroy them. In doing so, she had discovered that true victory sometimes came not from defeating opponents but from transforming them into allies through the simple act of treating them with dignity and compassion.